So today I got a really simple but yet uh, understanding for you. But it's very simple. It's just a short little, and as I said, little math idea. So let's get into it right now. It's very little, very short video, whatever. So when you have expression and arithmetic expression, as I say, so when you have 2c plus, or no, okay, 2c times 2d, suppose. When you have such operations, you can do one certain thing. When you have such operations, you can do one certain thing, that is, see, when you write them, like the idea is when you write them. But okay, let's first talk about how we multiply. Sometimes many people observe it as 2 times c times 2 times d, and many people just like group the, like, what are you gonna say, group the constants and group the variables. After that, they just write 4cd, because they just grouped those two variables and multiplied with them, and the variables get multiplied with them. They just wrote. It's a very easy way, but we never understood in their fundamental way. I will explain. I already told you that multiplication is repeated addition. It is just more than, it's just a clever way to understand. Like when you're doing maths in exam, you can't really say like, uh, as 2c means c plus c, because that's what 2c represents, and 2d means d plus d, and you cannot distribute c plus c in d plus d and distribute the d in c plus c. It's really complicated, and not only complicated, it's like you have to do fast math. But when you try to understand, if you're trying to understand this video, not this video is for me, whatever. Now when you have, oh man, this is stupid. So when you have 2c times 2d, it is always represented as c plus c times d plus d. And always remember, when expanding such equation, you always have to give brackets. Okay, and you can tell me why I have to give brackets, because these brackets are literally telling you to do such things first. When you are as I say them, if you write them in their non-simplified form, you would get this equation, because that's what it means. That's what it meant, because if you didn't give the brackets and wrote it as c plus c times d plus d, it would essentially use the normal arithmetic rules of multiplying. Like they would just first multiply the c and d, you would get cd plus c plus d. It isn't the same operations. Like when you always write such forms in, like here the brackets represents, look how these brackets are useful. Like these brackets are useful because they're representing what this equation means: 2c times 2d, that means c plus c times d plus d. And here 2c times 2d, that means here the c plus c was simplified into 2c first, and 2d was simplified into like 2d first, then multiplied. That means brackets, that's what brackets are for. They're just representing what to do first and what to do, and second bracket represent what to do second, the third bracket represent do third. So while always writing such equations in their, what am I gonna say, in their full form or in their meaningful form, you always have to, like when you write 2c, when suppose you have 2c, you always have to give brackets c plus c, because that's in every cases. When you have, just suppose if you just have c plus c, in that case you could just simplify it into 2c, because that is your whole math. There's none more than this. But when you have sums 2c plus 2d of two multiplicants or two products of a two multiplicants, you always, but when you try to understand them, you always write them in their meaning form or in their previous form. You always have to use brackets because they were look this. If you don't give brackets, it just means that I told you, if you don't give the brackets, what they mean. Because look, the 2c, it was expanded first, then you got 2c times 2d. Sorry, no, it's not multiplication, it's times 2d. Like you first you did with 2c, then you simplified 2d. You just firstly do the 2c times d plus d. Like look, this bracket. Now if we just use the bracket rule or BODMAS, what you got? First we just simplify this inside the bracket, so we get 2c times, now we do inside the bracket of this one, so we get 2d. Look, it's just their previous form. Or if you just want to understand, that's why when you unexpand or unsimplify such equations like 2c 2d 2f in expression any expression like multiplication, addition, whatever you do, you always have to write them in brackets, because that's what they mean. Bracket just, that's what they means. They were first simplified, then added, multiplied, divided, whatever is done. They were not like randomly added. Done. Let's go into a much more complex one as an example, and after that this video will be ended. I think you understood it well. If you didn't, it's just a stupid little thing that you just didn't understood. It's a very common sense if you think so. So suppose you have 2 times y squared times 3y, or let's just take 2y, because 2y, because of, now let's rewrite in their unsimplified form. So when you write in their unsimplified form, we use brackets because they were simplified first. Of course, it's a y squared would be y times y times 2y. That means y plus y. As I said, look, it's just in their unsimplified form. Like when you always have to rewrite these expressions, these terms in expressions like 2y, 2x, these terms in an expression in their unsimplified form, you always have to use brackets because they were simplified first. That's why then they after that they were multiplied. And if you don't use brackets, then it would just use normal PEDMAS or BODMAS, or just brackets first, order seconds, something like, not something like, that's the whole way, that's how math works in this way. But when you use the bracket, it actually explains the order, actually explains what was done first, actually explains the whole equation. So you always have to know 2y. Now let's multiply this thing, so you get 2y squared. Because 2y squared, because how, let me show you. Y times y means, like y times y means y was added y times, or y plus y dot 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 y times. Now we don't know what is y, so how may we add y times y? So y times y just simplifies to 2y squared. How? Sorry, now 2 times, now we can write it as 2 times y squared times, because we simplified this thing first, then times y plus y. Now 2 times y means, let's simplify from like in normal way. Like here you can just think that you can just switch order and do it simply, but let's just understand fundamentally and in their raw form, or what they actually mean. So now when you have 2 times y squared, you always have to write it as y squared plus y squared times y plus y, right? I did a little bit of mistake here. It's not like this. It should be little something like this. Now look here, let's just first multiply these two. Like in when you have multiplying a lot of numbers at the same time, you just have to first with the 2. So if I just do 2y times y squared, let's just do this thing first with second bracket. So we may get y squared plus y squared. That's what 2 times y squared means, times, oh man, I wrote it bigger. So we can write it as y squared times, sorry, added y squared, because we did the 2 times y squared first. Because y squared, even if you break it into its original equation or original form, it can't be simplified further, because you cannot add y times, because that's what y times y means, y squared. So but when you multiply 2 times y squared first, you always have to retain it in there, 2 times y squared plus y squared times, uh, yeah, you have to use the bracket here because you did that thing first. So y squared times y squared, sorry, added y squared plus y squared times um, y plus y plus y. Now let's just simplify this thing first. So you get 2y times y squared times y plus y. So you may ask, why did you simplify it here, not after distributing? I simplified here because, first of all, to make it easy, okay, let's just do it for in their non-simplified form. Okay, let's do it. So let's do it here. So wait a little bit. Please ease it a little bit. Yeah, now we need, right? Okay, we got y squared times, okay, we already got it. Now let's distribute the y squared plus y squared times y plus y. Okay, so we get y squared plus y squared times y plus y squared plus y squared times y, because the first y was added y squared plus y squared times, and the second y was also added y squared times y squared plus y squared times. So eventually now we can write it, we have to switch sides, because y squared plus y squared, if you add y, I already explained why you have to switch sides. It's in our FOIL method videos. So if you check that, it's a very common sense. I'll make another video about it. Now when you have y squared, now we switch sides and write it as y times y squared plus y squared plus y times y squared. And now switch side, y squared plus y squared. Now we distribute the y in the y squared, so we get y cube plus y cube plus y cube plus y cube. Now I got 4y cube simplified form. Look, 4y cube, and it's also 4y cube. Look, 2 times 2 times, like after grouping, y squared times y, which is 4y cube. So I think you have understood what I've said, and it's a really common sense. So goodbye for now. Yeah.